Okay, recording.
Okay. Hello, everyone. We'd like to welcome you to the 6th session of our interview series on the edited volume, International Studies in the Philippines, Mapping New Frontiers in Theory and Practice, published by Routledge. Today, we are interviewing Adonis Elumbre, author of the chapter Discursive Experiments in Vernacularizing International Studies in the Philippines. Adonis Elumbre is an assistant professor and a former chairperson at the Department of History and Philosophy, College of Social Sciences, University of the Philippines, Baguio. He teaches history, social sciences, and development studies. His areas of interest include intellectual histories and international studies. He sits as an editorial board member for the Philippine journals The Cordillera Review and Saliksik. He is also a lifetime member of the Pambansang Samahan ng Psikolohiyang Pilipino, National Association for Filipino Psychology, and Philippine Historical Association. Conducting the interview will be myself, Francis Cruz, and Dr. Nasif Adyong, both from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and editors of the book. Hello, Adonis. How are you?
Hi, Francis. Hi, Nasef.
Maybe we could
Hello.
start with you giving us a little bit of background about factors, events, and experiences that have influenced and shaped your thinking about the world and your own research.
Thank you. Well, primarily it's my academic socialization that contributed to how I think about my surroundings. My undergraduate was in history, while my master's was in international studies with specialization in ASEAN. This sort of mashup developed in me a way of framing issues at various scales, from the present to the past, from the global to the local. Then there's also my profession as an educator in the University of the Philippines, Baguio. What we have here is a tradition of the social sciences where disciplines are not self-contained, but in constant dialogue with one another. And so I'd say that my article or my chapter seeks to put together these different disciplines. Another major influence would be my involvement and engagement in particular government and non-government organizations, as well as broader social movements. So I'd like to think that experiences from these help academics like myself to ground perspectives, and it reminds us, or it reminds me, that one scholarship is always for the people. Finally, I think one such factor that contributed to my thinking about the world would be the generation that I belong to. So I'm part of the millennial, the so-called millennial generation. So events and phenomena like technological advancements, regional developments, illiberal regimes, populisms, late capitalism, disasters such as what we're having right now, all these contributed to how I view the world at the moment.
Okay. Maybe with those influences in mind, you can talk about the writing of your chapter and what its main arguments are in relation to what you've just said.
Yeah. So my article seeks to articulate a non-mainstream version of international studies in the Philippines. This international studies is one that is written in the vernacular, that is in Filipino or Tagalog, wherever one stands in the linguistic debate. I argue in my article that at various points in our past, there have been consistent counter-hegemonic discourses of the international articulated from within the country, using our own codes, tapping into our own thought worlds, and circulated to the public through our own language. This is paradoxical to us, for most countries often articulate their visions of the international using their own categories of analysis and languages. So by demonstrating the consistent experiments in the past to vernacularize the field of international studies in the Philippines, it is our hope, or it is my intention in the article, to show particular possibilities in advancing the field. In writing this article, I benefited from my disciplinary anchors in history and international studies. This chapter is primarily an exploratory intellectual history of international studies in the Philippines with vernacular sources as its main focal point. There's also an adherence to the principles of multidisciplinarity in that article, as the analysis sought to combine cultural and political matrices. Towards much of the field's history in the Philippines, one would likewise find a strong link to social movements, especially those that challenge the status quo of the day. So all this can be found in the article that I've written. Finally, there's that question on how to make international studies relevant to us as a people today. Our present context is one that is extremely troubling, especially in terms of territorial sovereignty and global disorder. When I was writing the article, these are the same circumstances that I had to reflect on while narrating the intellectual excursions of an inward-looking but outward-oriented international studies in the Philippines.
All right. Seeing that you've written this
Mhm,
chapter and you talked a bit about how you offer a kind of alternative to how international studies is done in the Philippines, what do you think is your contribution to the
mhm,
general knowledge of international
mhm.
studies in the country?
Yeah. So the main intention of the chapter is modest, really. That is to demonstrate the possibility, as you said, alternative international studies in the Philippines, uh, primarily through its vernacular forms. In that sense, the contribution to the general knowledge of international studies on providing a historical narrative that is not state-centric nor heavily tilted towards Euro-American traditions. This is an evolving narrative like any other historical account, but I do hope that this chapter will provide a platform for those who seek to further explore uncharted periods or themes in the history of international studies in the Philippines. One such framework that I've explored in the article is what has been referred to as Araling Kabanwahan, which translates to a form of international studies for and by Filipinos about anything and everything on the international that is relevant to us, to the Filipinos themselves. While these may appear commonsensical, the reality is that we still think of the international as tantamount to the English-speaking communities of the world. As I said, this is not quite the reality. Inasmuch as this chapter is historical and empirical, it is also theoretical and conceptual in that it attempts to map out configurations of appropriating IS in the country. So I think or these are the main contributions of the article of the chapter.
Adonis, thank you for your contribution to what we may call as Philippine international relations. What advice can you provide to students
Mhm.
and novice scholars in the country regarding IS, international studies as a field of knowledge, and as a profession?
So rather than advice, I believe that much is going on in international studies, but there's always room for advancing the agenda and interest. My appeal, or one such appeal that I find very interesting would be to continually seek
Adonis, we can't hear you. Probably
Sorry.
there's a kind of technical difficulty in the signal.
Okay, let me check. All right.
Oh, yeah, that's better. I
Okay.
think we can
All right.
hear. Yeah, good.
Okay, good. So as I said, I'd probably call this an appeal rather than an advice to continually seek for topics and discussions that go beyond the usual frames of international relations or uh, international studies. I think there are plenty of mechanisms for this. One such mechanism would be to take seriously inter and multidisciplinary work and engagement. As it stands now, there's feeling that multidisciplinarity and its varied forms are mere buzzwords, but I think they can serve as actual institutional mechanisms for talking and researching about international rapid disciplinal prides and intellectual elitisms to me are counterproductive for reinvigorating international studies in the Philippines. In relation to my article, I feel strongly that it is about time to create a discursive space for an international studies in the vernacular. If we want IR and IS to be meaningful and relevant, we need to find ways to bridge the communicative gap between those from above, uh, that is to say, the state and the academe, and the common folks. So I think the vernacular has that capacity of bridging said communicative gap. Aside from strengthening the vernacular's position in international relations and international studies, I think more and more language specialists, country experts, area experts, translators should be developed further such that IR and IS in the Philippines will not be dependent on the English language along with its many related forms as foreign languages, the main driver of IR and IS in the country. So those are my appeals rather than advices.
Thank you, Adonis. Our last question for today is, what are your thoughts on how can international studies in the global South, particularly in Southeast Asia or here in the Philippines, can move forward, advance, and have a conversation with the mainstream Western international relations?
Yeah, thank you. That's that to the set. This is probably the most interesting of all the questions. I think confronting this inquiry has a certain epistemic potential to it that can be a subject of debate between and among IR and IS academics and practitioners in the country. There are well-meaning scholars both in the West and in the global South who are in search of models by which such conversations can be made more fruitful among them. So there are progressive impulses from within the global South and even in the West. My thoughts, however, deviate a bit from these preoccupations. I think that instead of spending too much energy in asking about how we can participate globally, we should reorient towards asking about how we, as Filipinos, among ourselves, can talk about the global. This is not to shut ourselves off, for it is impossible, but to have a sense of priority in our conversational circles. So as I said earlier, the priority, I think, for any discipline is always the people, how to be more inclusive, how to be more participatory and democratic in our discourses. Interestingly, as I showed in my chapter, this inwardness in discussing the international was always steeped in the language of solidarity and fair play. That means to say that prioritizing ourselves and being in communion with the global society are not necessarily opposing projects. One such realization that I had from my article is that those who pursued a vernacular version of international studies knew exactly how to converse with foreign entities. In other words, generating a stronger platform from within could propel a more fruitful conversation with the West and its mainstream IR, international relations.
Thank you, Adonis.
Yes.
Thanks very much, Adonis, for your
Thank you.
contributions.
Mhm.
And please stay tuned for more interviews from international studies in the Philippines. And we hope to see you all again soon.